world is becoming more unglued by the day. Local consequences are now showing up. We are seeing sky-high gas prices, higher food prices, shortages, and more. How should you respond? Go to redpills.tv/patriot. That's redpills.tv/patriot. And secure your long-term emergency food storage from My Patriot Supply. My Patriot Supply is by far the largest preparedness company in America. They're in stock and shipping quickly in unmarked boxes to your door. Their emergency food supplies last up to 25 years in storage. When you need it, it'll be there. Lunches, dinners, drinks, and snacks totaling over 2,000 calories a day. Get free shipping on any order over $99. Again, go to redpills.tv/patriot.
From the spaceship in the sky to the simulation in the mind. Let's all embark on another journey of Conversations on the Fringe.
All right. Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, wherever you are in the world. My name is Josh, and that is my guest tonight, Samuel Chong. And this is Red Pill Project's Conversations on the Fringe. This is where we talk about all those things that are weird, wacky, unusual, on the edge of conversation that people don't usually talk about on a daily basis. And tonight, we're going to be having a great conversation with Samuel Chong. He's a certified court interpreter and Chinese translator in Los Angeles. He was instrumental in arranging for the Chinese publication of Michel Desmarques's book, The Thiaoouba Prophecy, of which we're going to talk about that tonight. We're going to talk about ancient history. We're going to talk about what the Theobins really have laid out in Michel's book here. Samuel, how are you doing today?
I'm doing well. I'm doing great. Thank you for having me here.
Well, I appreciate you coming on, and I'm still trying to see if the foxhole. Guys, if the foxhole is up and running, please let me know. I'm not seeing it on the live streams, so let me know. I've already put it on twice. If not, you guys can jump on over the Rumble. But I appreciate you joining us tonight. And this is he was introduced to us by Dr. Bruce Solheim. And so you know that he's going to be one heck of a guest tonight. And we're going to talk about some very interesting topics. Samuel, tell me a little bit about yourself and kind of how you fell into this book, The Thiaoouba Prophecy.
You know, when I was young, I always looked forward to more knowledge, more information, because I always thought that we are just progressing too slowly. I just wanted to advance much faster. I thought that the best way to do that is to get a shortcut to have information from the ETs who have advanced civilizations. So I was searching for information about contactees who received such information. And in China, I was born in China, and in China there was such information available, but they never revealed the sources. So after I came to the US in 2014, I actually searched on Amazon and looking for books that contain information about contactees. So I found this book. It was originally titled Abduction to the Ninth Planet. And I borrowed it from the library and I read it. I couldn't put the book down because it reveals so much information that really brought a lot of closure to some of the questions I had a long time ago. especially the paranormal activities on Earth, the mysteries and ancient civilizations, as well as like something about the stories in the Bible.
Interesting. Now, this book ends up leading you to this other book. Now, kind of give me your perspective, because you said in China, this information really isn't easily accessible in the sense of spirituality.
That is correct. In China, the government controls everything. They limit the number of books that could be published each year, and the number has been decreasing every year since the last 8 years or 10 years or so. And people just were yawning and looking for books on spirituality, but there are not so many books on the market that people would just purchase.
Interesting. So you had this curiosity. What really engaged this curiosity in you when you were younger?
Because I was very curious about everything. Basically, why did the ships and planes disappear in the Bermuda Triangle? Who built the Great Pyramid of Egypt? For what purposes? What about the statues on Easter Island? And what about the Bible, the stories in the Bible? Before even after a few years after I came to the U.S., I read the Bible. I didn't believe a single word in the Bible. It just didn't make sense to me. But after reading the book Thiaoouba Prophecy, I believed in the stories in the Bible because it connects all the dots. And I found that to be very interesting because, if the ETs are really advanced from us, they should be able to answer all the questions or resolve all the mysteries. They should guide us in the right way. Some people say the ETs might just invade us and to destroy us. If they are really intentionally trying to do that, they would have done that long time ago. They don't need to wait for such a long time. So I believe the real ETs are benevolent, and they're just guiding us, like our mentors, helping us to go on the right path.
And I like that perspective as well, is that if there is an advanced civilization out there that is interacting on this planet and they wanted to take us over, they would have done this already. I mean, it wouldn't be that hard. I mean, all you would have to do is turn humanity against each other, infiltrate the political, the social. Well, that's exactly what's happening now. But I'm just saying is it wouldn't be that hard for them to utilize their weapons of mass destruction to annihilate us. And we got to assume that at some point in a alien civilization's evolution, that they move beyond that perspective of war or domination or conquering other civilizations, because there doesn't seem to be, I could only imagine, is if we had faster than light technology that could take us to Alpha Centauri in an hour or 2 hours, or take us 100 million light years in just a day or two, right? If we had this level of technology, if we had various free energy technologies, really you transition your mission as a being from this of domination of resources to more of evolution and discovery of origins and who you are and what you can bring about into the universe.
Yes, exactly. This book specifically mentions that there are financiers around the world trying to gain positions and political influences against the common people, and they suppress a lot of the hidden technologies of clean energy. And it also is very specific about the hydrogen engines. It says that the book was written in the late 1980s, and it said that long time ago, hydrogen engines were already invented on Earth, but they were suppressed by some of the interest groups. And I found that to be very interesting because, if you know the guy Stanley Meyer, he invented a car that ran on water. If you really think about it intuitively, you can just use some kind of vibrational frequency to break the hydrogen and oxygen bond of water and use the hydrogen as an energy source. So I think this book is really revealing. And after my visit to the author, I learned that the Tao, the ET mentioned in the book, told him specifically that there are 12 families in the world running behind everything. And but the names of the 12 families were not named.
Right. Well, that's interesting because there is a former CIA operations manager by the name of Dr. John Coleman who witnessed firsthand the corruption, the collusion, and the infiltration that had happened in our intelligence communities back in the 1970s. He went on to write a series of different books, but the most popular one was known as the Committee of 300. And he did a seminar presentation on this in the early 1990s, which everything that he was saying then is coming true right now. And he talked about the various 12 different Illuminati bloodlines. He talked about what's known as the old black Italian nobility. This is the ancient Phoenicians who invaded into Rome during the height of the empire. They took over the Vatican, they took over the government, and they infiltrated their own rule over it through a classed feudalistic society through the reign of various different bloodlines of families of the Phoenicians. So I 100% agree with you on that, and that's kind of an interesting part right there.
Yeah, speaking of the Illuminati, this book, The Thiaoouba Prophecy, led me to find the other book called 334 Lies. I found that book because I was looking for information on how to see auras, the human energy field. Because in Thiaoouba Prophecy, it talks about the importance of being able to see the human energy field or the auras and to interpret them. I was looking for information online, and I found information on forums saying that there's a German book that talks about that. And I I did some research and found that book in German, and I translated it into English just to be able to access that information. It turned out to be written by the highest chair of a secret society that started in Germany. And is basically an autobiography of the author who claims to be the highest chair of that organization. And it really it talks about how they kind of use esoteric knowledge, such as a special form of astrology, and also a form of meditation to do a lot of the supernatural that people would consider to be supernatural power or abilities. And they also talked about extensively how they influence world politicians in a way that the politicians themselves don't feel that they're being bribed or being influenced in a very subtle way. They have branches in, they started in Germany, but they also have a headquarters in New York City at that time. But the book is not for everyone because it's very graphic. It details a lot of the tortures that they impose on some of the innocent people, gruesome graphic scenes. But my personal knowledge is that the people in that organization are just like us, common people. They're not reptilians or ETs. I concur with a guy named Ronald Bernard, who actually worked for the members of the Illuminati. He says those people have supernatural powers. They can read people's mind and have certain kind of ability to mind control other people. But they're just human beings. I think when two different books that have no relationship to each other concur or corroborate, I think we have to take the information seriously. And I suggest people to look into Ronald Bernard, the Dutch banker. He has a lot of videos on YouTube as well.
Yeah, you're going to have to send us that information. We'd love to get into that. And it's interesting. You're talking about discovering auras. Have you ever heard of dicyanin?
No, not really. No.
So in the early 1900s, a chemist was trying to develop a new type of filter for cameras. And he came across this chemical substance known as dicyanin, which has been outlawed since, completely illegalized. But you put them into these goggles and you can see the human aura, you can see energy fields around plants and animals. If you remember the 1990s movie They Live, where he was always putting on the goggles and he was seeing like obey, control, he was seeing all the aliens around him. That movie was based upon dicyanin and these various types of glasses that you can actually get. They're expensive when you find real ones, but you have to find real ones. I used the Museum of Tarot He actually develops it himself. This guy is an absolute genius, but he's reverse engineered it and he develops it. They work and they're pretty crazy because you can see a person's energy field, which is, I think, is just nuts.
Yes, and being able to see the energy is very important because it can tell you what's going to happen on your physical body, but also it tells you whether the person is not being truthful or the person would have some kind of diseases. It can tell if a person is kind-hearted. It can also foretell a lot of other things. Like there's a lady named Rosalind Berry. She says that when she saw like two teams of a football game having a match, and then she could just tell which team was going to win just from looking at the auras. The aura of the winning team member, the team was stronger than the other one. So it's very important, very useful.
That's crazy. Yeah, I mean, I've been introduced and ordained into various types of what we can call, I guess, magic or psychic abilities. They are very real. I've met people that can do some amazing different things. You talked about these people that are in these high up elites. They can read minds. They can do other types of what we would consider, and what the Theobins would consider, I guess, magic in a sense. And really, magic is just a level of knowledge that is far greater than ours in the sense of how reality works and the relationship between a spiritual entity and reality and how that all conjoins together to bring about this formulation. Or at least that's kind of how I would define it. But I find it interesting that you said that because a lot of the ancient mysteries that these elitists actually look into, and you said it gets kind of gruesome, it deals with ritualistic sacrifice. And the ritualistic sacrifice is brought about to actually kind of create a transference of energy to what's known as a magical channel, or this channel that's created between the spiritual realm and our physical realm, which ushers in this power or this energy that gives them the ability to actually do these things.
You're absolutely right. In that book, 334, it talks about how they get the other person's energy by eating that person's heart. Mm-hmm. It's very, very kind of, it's terrible. I mean, The book is not for everyone, but I recommend that book not for this purpose, but for the purpose that the author, the highest chair of that organization, at the end finally realized that everything is about love, unconditional love. He actually was enlightened at the end. And he was trying to make that organization more like a contributor for world peace. But then the purpose of him revealing everything that he wrote was that he found that there was another, like a younger person rising up that who had more this kind of powers or supernatural abilities than him. He wasn't able to control him or maybe suppress him, or maybe, and he was trying to bring the knowledge to the world so that people can really know what's going on. Because no matter how supernatural abilities they have, how strong their abilities are, they're afraid of the people, the mass. So it's trying to give us a solution. If we have this kind of concerted actions, and they're afraid of us, the people.
I agree, and you know, this is an interesting part, and I want to get into Thiaoouba Prophecy. I really do, but I think this is an important aspect to cover as well. This has been one of the theoretical models that I've worked with in the sense of ancient civilization moving into current day, is that there's always been a maintenance of these elites to keep the population below a critical threshold. And one of the main reasons is because we have something known as the banister effect. And this is something that it's widely known, but it's something that I put out there. And Bannister, if we remember back in the 1950s, he broke the first 4-minute mile at the Olympics. And before this, doctors said it's impossible, nobody can do it, your heart will explode. And for centuries, people believed that you couldn't break a 4-minute mile. And then Bannister comes out and does this, and within 5 years of him doing it, 100 people started to do it. And to this day, I mean, thousands upon thousands of people have broken a 4-minute mile, which it gets set within our subconscious. It gets set within our collective conscious, and it begins to be not an impossibility, but transitions to a possibility. And I think one of the things with the elitist and humanity is that humanity is continually learning, expanding, and evolving. And that we are waking up into this nature, which is predominantly spiritual and psychic. And that once you have a critical mass, you can't stop that evolution. And so I think every few hundred years, they call the civilization back as much as they possibly can to stop that evolutionary boundary from being breached.
Exactly. It's also mentioned in the book, Thiaoouba Prophecy. The book, Thiaoouba Prophecy, is actually not a book of prophecy. It's a book of warning, but it also gives us a solution. The solution is what they form the word nonviolent resistance, like what Gandhi did in India. They're saying that if we act together, if we have a strike against the elitists, and we would lose little and they would lose big. So it's just some kind of awareness that we have to have and to wake people up. And it actually, it's very interesting the way that is described in that book. The example was actually set on another planet in which a planet of the same category as Earth had a dictatorial government or totalitarian regime. And there were 4 people on that planet that actually started like a peaceful demonstration or peaceful fasting. And then the government shot the 4 people and the 4 people died. 6 months later, people began to realize what the 4 people were trying to do. And they began this kind of massive strike. The police joined the strike and everyone joined the strike. And then it was like a peaceful revolution on that planet. It's very interesting. It's illustrating that we could do the same, and it's indicating that we should do the same.
So, Michel Desmarquet wrote this book. You come across it, and you read it, and you're absolutely just fascinated by this book to the point where you believe that this book is truth. What do you do next? You hunted this guy down.
I did. I hunted it down because I found the information in the book very incredible and fascinating. But in the postscript of the book, it says that there are more incredible things that the author was not allowed to write in the book because we're far from understanding them. It got me. I was very curious about what he was not allowed to write in the book. So I tracked him and I found him that he was living Southern Island in Vietnam, and some of the tourists saw him, met him, and took pictures of him. And I showed one of the pictures to the taxi driver after I landed the city. And then the second try, I located him, and he was kind of very annoyed at my visit the first time I met him. And he was actually not interested in people intentionally trying to locate him. He was trying to be a private person. And but then the day before I was going to leave, he showed me a contract. He said, Samuel, how about if you try to help me out on this matter and try to see what's happening with my book, because the publisher in China paid me $2,000, but then I never heard from them again. Could you tell me if the book was published in China or not? I was trying to get the information that he was not allowed to write in the book, so I was trying to please him. I gladly accepted that offer, and I tried my hard, tried my best to have the book published in China. And then he sent me an email saying that I don't know how they knew it, how Tao knew it, the ET, and he said that she said that I could tell you what I was not allowed to write in the book, but you have to come here personally, and I have to tell you in person. Yeah. So I visited him the second time.
Right. So China wanted to edit the book, and certain parts couldn't be put in, huh?
That's right. They actually did. The book was published in China as a science fiction. The author, Michel Desmarquet, was strongly against having the book published as a science fiction, but he allowed me to have the book published in China as a science fiction. And the Chinese government removed the parts about China, removed the parts about communism, and a few other kind of small parts.
Interesting. So give me a synopsis of this book and kind of tell me the story and what Michel kind of experienced?
Okay, he woke up in the middle of the night in Australia where he lived. And then he wrote a note telling his wife that he would be gone for 10 days and not to worry about him. And then he walked outside of his house. He was lifted up, and then he saw this kind of beautiful 9-foot tall blonde ET named Tao. And they first arrived at a parallel universe. And then he was taken onto their spaceship. He was disinfected by yellow light and blue light. And then on the spaceship, he was told about the history of Earth, where black people came from, where yellow people came from, where the Caucasians came from, where the Jewish people came from. The Jewish people are actually very special because they came from a different category of planet, category 3. We are actually category 1, and the ETs are on category 9 planet. So we have different categories, and the highest level being 9. And then he was also told about some of the other things on Earth, like how the universe got created, how the planets, how the people, how human beings were created. And then he arrived on the planet Thiaoouba, and he was taken into the 7 Taoris, the 7 masters, the 7 like seniors of that planet. And he was told that we on Earth are at a very critical moment of time. We are like on a crossing road. We have to make a decision which way to go. We have to emphasize more on the spiritual aspect of our lives, not the material life. Otherwise, we are going to face a very catastrophic event. And he also was shown his previous 80 lives. So there's actually reincarnation, there's life after death, and he was told the meaning of life, in which life is actually a learning experience. We have to experience everything and to learn spiritual lessons. And after one dies, one will get the opportunity to review everything happened in his or her life. He would be able to feel how other people felt when he or she did certain things or acted in a certain way. And then he or she will be able to judge or evaluate how he or she did, and then to decide whether to take the next reincarnation life or next life or not. So in this sense, this is a book of revelation of the meaning of life. And also it's very specific about certain facts, such as the ET's intervention throughout history. It talks about the destruction of the 2 cities, Sodom and Gomorrah. And the reason for the destruction was not what we commonly believe, sodomy. It's not that. It's because the people in the 2 cities at that time were punishing the people who helped others. They were punishing the good people. So they were, in a sense, setting very bad examples for people who were in contact with them. They were just like cancer cells spreading the evils around the planet. So they decided to kind of take them out and by destroying the 2 cities. It also explains the stories in the Bible, such as how Moses led the Hebrews out of Egypt. There were kind of very interesting details. Especially, it talks about who Jesus was. And they're saying that there are 2 Jesus Christs. The Jesus born out of Virgin Mary was actually Jesus that was born from the implant of the embryo that they did on Virgin Mary. That Jesus was born because they really wanted to make the people at that time believe that he was someone special. He was the Messiah. So it matched the historical beliefs of the people. But that Jesus couldn't perform miracles. He was very spiritual. He was very evolved. He was very smart and intelligent, but he wasn't able to perform miracles. So it's very interesting because the Bible doesn't have any record of the young Jesus performing any miracles. So that Jesus went to India, so there was record of Jesus being in India, and then passing through China and went to Japan and died in Japan. So there's a Jesus, the tomb of Jesus Christ in Shingo Village, Japan, that people can look it up, searching like the tomb of Jesus Christ in Shingo, Japan, Shingo Village, Japan. Christ, on the other hand, was someone from the planet Thiaoouba. He was one of the Theobins who could perform miracles. He kind of like went into a body made by the Theobins to a body that looked like Jesus that died in Japan. And he performed all the miracles just to show that he was someone special. And he preached spirituality and love. He resurrected 3 days after being put on the cross, just to show people that there's life after death and there's reincarnation. The book is very interesting because it specifically mentioned the 5 council meetings of the Catholic Church that intentionally removed certain concepts.
The Council of Nicaea.
Yes, this is one of them, but there are also other councils as well.
Yep. Well, the first one, Emperor Constantine, Council of Nicaea, 325 AD. That would have been the most paramount one that began removing a lot of the Gnostic and the Hermetic aspects of pre-Catholicism, or pre-Christianity. Yeah.
Yes, and this very specific also tells some of the inconsistencies in the Bible in the Old Testament. I find that to be fascinating. I go to a Christian church, Mandarin Baptist Church in Los Angeles. So when I try to bring this book up to the senior pastors, they banned the book. So this is the book actually led me to believe in the stories in the Bible.
Yeah.
To follow the teachings of Jesus Christ, but they banned this book. So to this day, I'm trying to ask them to revert the ban, and they haven't really responded to me.
Oh, that's crazy. Now, you said some interesting things there, and I want to kind of go back to the beginning where you were talking about. Number one of the things you said is you talked about the meaning of life, and this is to learn, to gather knowledge, a wisdom base, right? And this is interesting because we have a saying around here, one that I created, that evolution, spiritual, physical, mental, is learning what you did not know that you did not know. Because in the universe, that's the only way that evolution ever occurs. Is if you continuously do the same thing, you're never going to evolve beyond that point. But if you go out there and you learn things that you did not know that you did not know, you are going to be in a state of advancement towards a new type of evolution. The other part is you talked about this 9-foot being. This is interesting because I have an experience in my life, and we can maybe talk about that. But can you describe these beings to me?
So they're like very beautiful. They look very young, like in their 30s, and they never age. They can live forever, so they can regenerate their bodies at will. They're hermaphrodites, so they have male and female sexual organs, and they have all these supernatural abilities that Jesus had. So they could levitate, they could materialize objects, they can communicate through telepathy, and they can really do a lot of miraculous things, or they can heal the dead, they can heal a lot of diseases, all the diseases that you can name of. They can actually create a human being, adult human being in 48 hours. They can just they can foretell what's going to happen in the future for about 100 years. They can access the Akashic Records. They can actually bring people to their past lives and really experience what happened in their past lives. And they have all the knowledge. Very interesting.
So I want to touch that. So they're about 7 to 9 feet tall.
Yes.
They eye color, I want to say kind of like a palish white skin. They have kind of a grayish hair, typically long.
Mostly blonde.
Blonde, like white blonde. Yep. Yes. Sometimes kind of grayish tint. They wear like white clothing, like just like very vibrant white or kind of glistening metallic type of clothing.
On their planet, they wear a very colorful kind of like Indian clothing, like the people in India. They wear that kind of long robes. and they're very colorful and very bright because they say that colors have therapeutic effects on people, and they use that to stimulate certain parts of the body, like the auras and the chakras in the body.
So I'll let you in on a little secret here, and most of my listeners already know this because I've explained this before. Is that I did what's called a life between life regression. So there's a few different books out there. One of them known as Journey of Souls by Dr. Michael Newton, which a lot of the stuff that you just explained is kind of exactly what he's saying as well, which is crazy, two correlating books. Another one is Dr. Brian Weiss, and that is Many Lives, Many Masters. And they talk about this in-between world that you go to between your incarnations on this planet. I did one of these hypnotic sessions, and unlike everybody else that came before me that's done these things, I kind of, when I went through this tunnel of death in my last life, they kind of take you to your last point of death in your last life. I was old, probably late 70s, early 80s. I was an engineer. I was living in Ohio. I was in a rocking chair in an older house. I was alone. I was drinking tea, and I died right there. And after that happened, I kind of like, you're kind of sucked up into this kind of grayish, I don't even know how to explain it. Kind of like, I call them cloud walls, but you're kind of like really in this very narrow tube, but it's not, doesn't feel narrow, but you know it's narrow. And
like a tunnel?
Yeah, it's like a tunnel. And you go through this pinhole of light, but when it went through the pinhole of light, I came out and there was nobody there. There wasn't family members or any of this kind of stuff waiting for me. There wasn't the massive amounts of people and the soul groups and all this stuff that they usually explain. And I kind of found this interesting. And I look across the room, and this, what appeared to be a woman, approached me, 7 to 9 feet tall, exactly as we just described. And she told me about my various different past lives. And she told me about the future, about the past, about how we got here. She told me about all these various aspects of the history of our civilization, the history of this planet, how this all came about, other different cataclysms and disasters that have happened, the great wars that have occurred within the galaxy. And I haven't shared a lot of this stuff with people, but this is one of my experiences. So when you said that, I'm like, oh my God, like this is interesting.
Yes, they actually described the ancient civilizations. Specifically, they described the two continents that sunk into the ocean. One was the Lemuria continent, and the other was the Atlantis. And Lemuria was actually on the Pacific Ocean. 300,000 years ago, there was a group of ETs that were originally from Arimal X3 planet that actually used the far side of the moon as their base to migrate to Earth. So there was actually some kind of alien base or ET base on the backside of the moon. We are going to find out more evidence on that, but it's very interesting that this book is revealing a lot of very interesting and verifiable information. A lot of evidence will come from the in the future. So those Lemurians were highly evolved people. They had this anti-gravitational technologies and ultrasonic vibrational system to really build a greater pyramid on that continent. That pyramid was actually 3 times the size of the Great Pyramid of Egypt. They used the pyramid to absorb cosmic energy and to communicate with people from other planets. They also used the pyramid to create rain. And they actually communicated and also got in contact with the Theobins. And they were, very peaceful and very, very kind of a good relationship until one day about 14,500 years ago, because of earthquake and the gaseous spells beneath the continent. That continent sunk suddenly, just almost in one day. And because they kept their technologies secret from other people elsewhere, the technologies were lost. Same thing happened for Atlantis. And the book really didn't elaborate a lot of the things happened on Atlantis, but it mentioned that the Great Pyramid of Egypt was actually built by someone originally from Atlantis about 17,000 years ago, by the person named Thoth. And he was a very learned person, and he built a pyramid in 9 years, in about 9 years. So I find that to be fascinating because it really corroborates with some of the modern scientific researchers saying that the pyramid is actually an energy center, and they have all this kind of theories how the pyramid can absorb energy, and I think more evidence is going to come out.
So I love this because Thoth is one of my probably go-to characters within Egyptian mythology. The great story of Thoth, for those that don't know, is that Thoth he was actually known as Hermes Trismegistus, and he came before the goddess Isis, who was the sister and wife to Osiris, who was the king of the universe, and she was the queen of the universe, as well as fertility in wisdom and knowledge. And it was said that behind the veil of Isis, which she wore upon her eyes, was contained the secrets of the universe, and no man hath come before her and lifted that veil until the day that Hermes came before her, lifted the veil, learned the secrets of the universe, then became deified later on as the god Thoth, but he taught it to his 4 disciples and sent them to the 4 corners of the earth after the great deluge to start again civilization. So absolutely love the story of Thoth, and I've heard many things in accounts that he was Thoth the Atlantean, and there's many accounts about this. He was the author of the Emerald Tablets of Thoth. Going into that, you just mentioned about the pyramids and accumulation of energy. So we were talking about this the other night. I think we were actually looking at an article about China producing weather manipulation technology, and they had these big metal. They look like guns, like Gatling guns, and they're pointing them to the sky. And they're talking about using silver iodide and salt, and this is actually doping that's done through planes, not through these guns. And I said, those are orgone accumulators. And if you know who Wilhelm Reich is, Dr. Wilhelm Reich, the former assistant to Sigmund Freud, he came out with this theory of this biological organism or field that is contained within everything that's living, and he called it orgone. And that if you created this, the substrate of organic and reflective material of orgone, you could accumulate it and it could do magical things. It could give you spiritual power, psychic abilities. It could heal you. It can produce rain when you don't have rain. He actually did this within 2 days during a massive drought in the Northeast. He took his orgone accumulator, just one of those guns, and that's kind of what the Chinese had, and pointed at the sky. Now, one of the interesting things they found out is that one of the most beneficial shapes for an orgone accumulator is a pyramid. Now, on the outside of the pyramids, we have limestone. And basalt and limestone are made out of organic material composites, organic and inorganic materials, which would be a perfect accumulator for orgone energy.
Yes, that's very, very true. And I did some research on that as well. And back to the book, one thing that's not written in the book is about the Sphinx of Egypt. The author, Michel Desmarquet, mentioned that there are 3 chambers beneath the Sphinx. Once we are ready, once we are spiritually evolved enough, the 3 chambers can be opened, everything will be revealed. And that's going to be the age of enlightenment, the start of the age of enlightenment. And I find that to be very interesting because Edgar Cayce also mentioned that too. So it's a Russian person as well. I think I'm just trying very hard to spread the messages out that people should really focus more on the spiritual aspect of their lives, so that we can have this kind of collective consciousness to have concerted actions to go on the right path. Because this book, I believe, is a final warning to us from the ETs. It's a very serious matter because Michel Desmarquet, he was actually hurt by this benevolent, beautiful ET who had a lot of unconditional love. He was hurt because they wanted him to remember the messages very clearly, because otherwise he would think that he was dreaming. And one of the messages was that really this group of ETs were guiding us throughout history. and they also disciplined us in the history as well. So if we really don't follow the right path, and we are going to probably be like naughty children, and I think it's going to have a very bad result.
And do you think we're at that crossroad right now?
We still have a lot of time, and that's why I'm working so hard to let people know about this, and especially the mainstream people. I'm trying to figure out a way to have the message accepted. So that's probably my life mission, my life purpose.
Well, yeah, and I hear you, because I think that we all have pieces to the puzzle, and we try to all go out there and help people understand to make them fit. And so I love what you're doing, and this is just absolutely fascinating. So, and getting into kind of where our world is coming to is we're de-evolving away from the spiritual center that was within us. And we can see this over the last 2,000 year period, that humanity, as they become more materialistic and technologically advanced, de-evolve in their spiritual nature and their connectedness to nature, God itself.
Yes, and there we are focusing too much on the different technologies and money and the financial markets. People actually, the most important, I think the most damaging aspect about this is the control of the media. I know you talked a lot about this, and I think people should really wake up and to seek for answers on their own and have independent thinkings, and to think more independently and not really rely on the mainstream media. I used to believe everything said on the mainstream media, by the mainstream media. And after, like, I think a few years ago, when I found out that a lot of the news really were not reported, I just never watched TV again. And I think people should really wake up. And a lot of people around me are still following the preachings of the church pastors, and I consider those mainstream media too. And also listening CNN or even Fox News. And I think people, I mean, you don't have to be sided to a specific mainstream media. They're all the same. I mean, for important revealing information, they just don't report it. It really doesn't matter if it's on one side or on the other side. They just censor everything, because if you really think about this, if you really pay attention, a lot of the licensed medical doctors in the United States cannot voice certain opinions out on certain subject matters. So I think people should really do a lot of research on this, and to really think about what's going on. And they really have to read between the lines, and really to look at what's happening around them. Are a lot of people just suddenly disappear? I something about me is that I used to do a lot of research about the mysterious death, like certain biologists or certain politicians or certain scientists that just suddenly die, like Stanley Meyer, who invented that car. So I did a lot of research, because we really cannot let them die in vain. We have to get out of something else. So why did they die suddenly, mysteriously, without any plausible explanation? What were they trying to do that really kind of made some people nervous?
Disrupted.
Yes. So I do a lot of trace tracking, or maybe just follow the lead. So I encourage people to do the same.
And out of that, what are some of the interesting things that you discovered from that?
I proofread a book just a few months ago, written by some of the important people in the Chinese military. They specialize in researching biological weapons. The gist of the book is that the SARS that happened 20 years ago were actually from man-made viruses. They were really man-made. And what happened about man-made things was that they don't survive in nature for more than 3 or 6 months. They just, because they cannot adapt to the environment of the host being human beings, human physical bodies. So they would disappear after 3 or 6 months. What's happening around in the world is that we see a lot of different variances. They just keep coming up, and we don't hear about the variances that came out in the very beginning anymore, because they just seemed vanished. They just disappeared. So what about the new variances that came about? So they had to be like intentional acts by certain people or certain government. Unfortunately, being a Chinese myself, I'm privy to certain information that's in Chinese, said by certain whistleblowers, and they actually came from my home country. So it's an unfortunate fact that I really feel sorry about. But people need to wake up and to really find out what's really going on. And actually, those kind of variances, they lose their potency after a few weeks. This is by the research done by those people in China, the Chinese military. And people really need to begin digging what really happened in my home country, the government. And they really need to separate the people from the government, because it's really the government that did a lot of the things that they shouldn't have done. And I think it's important also to know that a lot of Chinese people from my home country are brainwashed.
Yeah.
And they don't realize the seriousness of the thing that done by their government on other countries, or to other countries, to the people in other countries, including a few years ago. Like, being a Chinese myself, I know what Chinese people are good at. They're good at imitating products. If they can imitate like brand name products like iPhone or some of the other like products, they can also imitate and fabricate and like ballads too. If you really think about that, and there are evidence about it. People just need to look it up and to find it out. They're also good at another thing, which is hacking computers. With the Russians and also other group of people, and if they can hack computers like Apple computers or PC computers, they can also hack into some of the counting systems too. So I would strongly suggest people to wake up that what's really behind that everything that happened in this country and elsewhere.
So it's interesting too, and we can kind of transition into this because China is a very, very interesting place on this planet, because it's 50 years of the CCP who have rained down. We had Hong Kong, who is now back under the control, Taiwan, which is probably soon to be back under the control. Do you ever see the Chinese people waking up? Because you said a lot of them are brainwashed, and the same thing's happening here, and that's why we're making this transition in the United States towards communism. But do you ever see freedom for the Chinese people? Do you see this coming in the near future?
I do see that in the near future, but it's going to be a long process, because once people are brainwashed, it's really hard for them to know what's really going on, and it's hard for them to believe, because for a long time I just couldn't believe that it's my home country that did all those terrible things to the people in the world, because I was educated in a way that my home country loved everyone, and everyone have supposedly to see the Communist Party as their parents, and this kind of brainwashing technique was actually really effective, but I do see a bright future, because there are people who have woken up, and with a book being published in China, the Thiaoouba Prophecy, and being a bestseller in China. And I think people are beginning to realize that they really need to do something about it.
Do you think there are good guys who want the freedom for the Chinese people that are inside high-level Chinese Communist Party?
Not inside the high levels of Chinese Communist Party,
Okay.
But people from the outside. I can tell you what the high-level government officials in China are like. They don't care about the people at all. They care about themselves. When certain things happened in Taiwan, and they were going to kind of have some kind of military actions. But once Switzerland said that if you do that, we are going to side with the United States by revealing the personal assets of your high-level government officials, they backed down. It's that they backed down because they're afraid that their assets will be revealed. They care about themselves. They don't care about the people.
Right. And one more question on this while we're on this topic, and then I want to transition back to the Thiaoouba prophecy. What are your thoughts on what's going to happen with Chinese? We know that Jennifer Zhen, Lewd Media, leaked some audio back, I believe, in April and March of Chinese generals in Zhangguo that were talking about the invasion of Taiwan before November 2022. They were talking about outfitting 639 merchant ships. They were talking about troop movements to the coastal provinces. They're going to use DF-41 missiles to take out U.S. military warships that produced a blockade around Taiwan. And this seemed to be fairly accurate information because it all checked out, at least in our scope. What are your thoughts on China going to Taiwan? Time frame? Do you think it's going to happen?
I don't think that's going to happen as long as we have Switzerland and Liechtenstein on our side, on the U.S. side. If they are really going to release the personal assets of the high-level government officials, then the Chinese government will not invade Taiwan for sure, because they care about their personal assets. If their assets are frozen, then they're dead. I mean,
I love that.
We really have to we really have to pay attention to Switzerland, Liechtenstein, Singapore, and a few other countries.
That's awesome. And that's pretty interesting. That's probably why they're just running military exercise and they haven't done anything there yet. All right, now back to the book. So this is an actual journey that Michel actually had, and he recalls being on this spacecraft. This wasn't something that happened in a dream or in a spiritual realm. This is him physically being taken. Now, when you talked to him about this, what was it, that interaction like?
Well, my impression about him in the beginning was that he was a very kind of nice French person, very proud of himself, and he was telling jokes all the time. Although he was kind of annoyed at my first visit, he later, like, his attitude changed, and he was telling jokes all the time. And later on, I found out that that's actually a sign of depression, because if you think about it, he went to a place like a paradise with him for 9 days. And then he was told, you don't belong here. You have to go back and write a book. So after he came back to Earth, everything was not as nice or as nicely as what he experienced on Thiaoouba. So he was really trying to hide his depression just by telling people a lot of jokes. But when the subject matter of Thiaoouba and his experiences came about, he became very serious about it. And he mentioned a lot of details, like he saw the Theobins being able to transfer knowledge, just like downloading knowledge from each other. And he also mentioned that the Theobins were really kind of laughing at him when he asked questions like, oh, you could levitate or something like that. When he showed like a surprise, they always were kind of like very like us looking at like monkeys in a amused way. So, and he also asked them to teach him how to levitate and how to do the miracles, and they never responded. Kind of a way of saying that even if I teach you the ways, you wouldn't be able to do that because you are not evolved enough or something like that.
Right. And that makes a lot of sense. I mean, we've heard the idea of different genetic architectures and configurations which intertwine with the field of reality. In that you have a relationship with that reality and it's dependent upon your biological and your genetic makeup. And so that would make sense is that even if they taught you how to do it, you're still not evolved enough within your physical form to do it. So I kind of like that. What was your thought when he was telling you this story? Did he seem genuine?
Yes, he was extremely genuine. He actually mentioned the Book of Enoch to me. He said that Samuel, the Book of Enoch is really describing what I went through. So a lot of descriptions in the Book of Enoch really matched what he experienced. And he also mentioned that in a public lecture in Australia. And he also recommended the book Life After Life by Dr. Raymond Moody.
Yep.
So I think like a lot of specific detailed facts in the book really showed that this book is different from other supposedly books written by people who received channeled information. This book is also specific about World War II in the sense that the US government and Germany were kind of racing to develop the atomic bomb. And it was this group of ETs that prevented Germany from being the first country to develop the atomic bomb. They sided with the US because they believed that the US government at that time were more sincere in helping the people in the world. Otherwise, if Germany had the atomic bomb, there would have been more, like 3 times more death than otherwise.
Wow.
So very specific facts. I strongly suggest the audience to check it out.
Oh, we're definitely going to. Did they say anything in the book about what nuclear weapons actually do on the quantum level to the dimensionality of space?
Yes, they mentioned specifically that once the everything is interconnected, so once the nuclear bomb explodes, it affects everything in the universe in a very connected way, like it could be felt on their planet too. But on the other hand, it also mentioned that this is evolution or a path that had to happen because no matter on which planet atom or atomic bomb is discovered and rediscovered, so we have to go through this kind of path of discovering and developing the atomic bomb. But we really need to know that we should not play fire. We should not really use it in an irresponsible way.
Absolutely. You had mentioned it early on in the summary discussion. You were talking about Stanley Meyer, you're talking about a few other people, you were talking about various different hydrogen energy technologies. It's interesting because I just did an interview 2 weeks ago with a gentleman who's a spokesperson for LENR technology, the LENR technology, low electromagnetic nuclear radiation technology. They use what's called HH2, hydrogen hot tubes. And so they utilize an electrical catalyst within a nickel cadmium matrices to basically separate the hydrogen with electrical potentiality that's producing a 2.5 over unity situation within this fusion reactor. And we're seeing all these other types of alternative energy hydrogen level technologies coming out. What are your thoughts on this technology that is coming out these days and how it compares to what maybe they talked about in the book?
Well, the book really didn't go into details because on this subject matter because it really wants us to do the homework. The book is very, very interesting in a way that it touches a lot of points superficially. It's kind of trying to encourage us to do the homework, to go into the depth. I have 2 points on the hydrogen engine. One is that the key of separating hydrogen from the oxygen is to find the specific frequency that can cause like a resonant effect.
Yep.
So that the hydrogen atom and the oxygen can be separated more effectively, more efficiently from the water molecules. So once that's found out, it's going to happen. And the second point is that I really want everyone to know that this kind of technology, if you really want it to be commercialized on massive scale, it should be made public and not for personal gain. Because if a company or a person tries to apply for a patent on this technology, it would do two things. One is that the patent wouldn't be able to be filed or prosecuted because it relates to the national, I think, security.
Mm-hmm.
And there's a clause on the patent law that if it involves anything related to the U.S. Or national security, it cannot be made public. And the second point is that once they try to hide this technology or for personal gain, then a lot of the interest groups are going to find that person. They're either going to buy this off or make it disappear.
Mm-hmm.
So it has to be made public on massive scale immediately and simultaneously so that everyone can take advantage of this technology.
I love that, and you're right. And that's one of the questions that I was talking to of the spokesperson for the Lunar Technologies. I said, are they going to go public with this in the sense of make it public access, publicly accessible, kind of what Elon Musk does? And he said, no, they aren't. And they got some very big backers who are globalists. And I said, well, they're going to put a meter on it. And he goes, no, they're not. And I said, yes, they will. If you have globalists behind it, they're going to put a meter on it. But the technology is really simple to understand, and I think you nailed it right there. This is an idea that kind of was brought about by Nikola Tesla, is that when you have two molecules that are in the bonding stage, whether it's ionic bonding, covalent bonding, hydrostatic, or whatever it might be, is that bond is an energy relationship between those two molecules, which has a vibrational resonance. And if you can produce the antithesis of that resonance, you can destroy that covalent bond, you can destroy that ionic bond, and you can separate those molecules. You can also do the reverse in the sense of bringing them together. And this is one thing that I think Nikola Tesla talked about a lot. And that's been like the holy grail of hydrogen technology, is finding that resonant frequency of the covalent bonds between oxygen and hydrogen.
That's correct. There are people who actually have done this, but they haven't really made this technology or the frequency public. And they're trying to have commercialized it on their own. And this is why they have failed for the reasons that I just mentioned.
Interesting. So what do the Theobins say about fallen angels or evil in the sense of the universe and its structure and kind of what's happening in the universe?
Well, they really never talked about evil or devil. They talked about ghosts, but for evilness or devils, I think is only my personal opinion. I think it's our free will that we do certain things. Some people may choose to do certain evil things. Some people may choose to do spiritual things. It's a personal choice. I really don't buy the theory of reptilians because I think that's just people's imagination. And there's no proof on that too. And on the matter of ghosts, I do agree, and it's mentioned in the book that they exist. So it really explains what ghosts are. They're made of electrons. So we have a physical body. We also have an astral body made of electrons. The book is very specific and detailed, saying that we have 4 billion trillion electrons in our astral body. So when a person dies, the astral body leaves the physical body, and 81% of the electrons goes to the higher self after remaining on Earth for 3 days. So I find that to be very interesting because Jesus Christ resurrected after 3 days. And also in Tibetan customs, people are not supposed to touch the person who just passed away for 3 days. And the other 19% of electrons remain on Earth until they're either recycled by nature or when the person reincarnates again on Earth. So what we see ghosts are actually made up that 19% of electrons. Because of static forces, electrons, those 19% of electrons have they shape like the person when the person was living. So that's because of the static forces of the electrons. The electrons also contain memories. So one electron can contain the memory of a library, a regular size memory.
Mm-hmm.
So because they have certain memories, the ghosts often or frequently haunt the places they loved or hated. So there's nothing, once you know that the ghosts are actually made of electrons, there's nothing to be afraid of them. If you don't like the ghosts, you can just light a fire or use a lighter to dispel the electrons away.
Bring a magnet in.
Yes.
So, question: did they talk or discuss anything about time in the book?
Yes. Remember, the book was written in the late 80s. It says that the US government was trying to develop a time machine, but they so far had failed at that time because they really didn't focus on the vibrations. They focused much on the frequencies. So there's a difference. It made me think about the Philadelphia experiment.
I love it.
Yes. They say that we can really go back to time by visiting what they call the Akashic Records. Akashic Records are actually something that records all the history, all the things that happened on a planet. It rotates. It's like a cocoon rotating about 7 times the speed of light. So a learned person with practice through meditation or certain other skills can actually match the vibration of the cocoon by, and then that person would be able to go inside the cocoon and to see what happened in the ancient past. The author, Michel Desmarquet, actually experienced what it was like. So he actually visited the time when the Moria sunk, and he actually witnessed what happened about 14,500 years ago. So we could go back in time. Going to the future, it really doesn't mention anything about that in the book, but the Theobins can only see about 100 years into the future, not more than that.
And that's probably about because of the conscious unpredictability of nature and action, of free will, thought, and choice.
Exactly.
Interesting. I love it. Now, interesting enough, they talked a little bit in the book about the low-G gods of the ancient world, which potentially some of them were Theobins, right? And then they also talk about a little bit about what the Theobins believe to be God.
Yes. Well, first of all, a lot of the gods or goddesses in India were actually the Theobins. They were hermaphrodites, very beautiful. So a lot of the Indian pictures portray God to be very beautiful beings. But the Theobins say that the Theobins are Theobins, and what originally in the Bible, Jehovah mentioned about Jehovah were actually, or angels were actually Theobins. But God is God. God also created the Theobins. God created everything in the universe, like the planets, the stars, and animals and human beings. And we are part of God. We are part of God in a sense that God inserted a small, tiny portion of itself into each and every human being, just in order to experience the material life, the physical life that we are experiencing. So we send a lot of our experiences, our spiritual lessons back to God, so God can also feel how it is like. So in that sense, we are part of God and God is part of us. So when we encounter personal life challenges, we should not follow a specific organized religion. We should look inside of ourselves because the kingdom of God, the kingdom of heaven is within you. We can communicate with our higher self and find solutions.
I 100% agree with that one. That's been something I've taught for a very, very long time. Actually, I came about it through my studies within the mysteries and the occult, and understanding that God is an eternal mind, or the eternal spirit, however you want to look at that. And that I call it, there's a few variations here, and this is kind of a cool little mind screw, if you want to call it that. Is that, number one, I would perceive God to be absolute. That means that God contains everything. There's nothing outside of God. God cannot be contained within anything, right? God is the absolute. And so if God is the absolute, he's unknowable, unimaginable, incomprehensible, and you cannot understand it. Which means that any variation of truth that us as finite beings, even though we have an eternity of reincarnation, we're only here for a finite period of time, any bit of information or truth that we get within this time frame that we're here is only self-evident truth. It's a portion or an understanding or a perception ability of the absolute. We cannot know the absolute completely because we're not God, but we can only know a perception or a self-evident version of that. Which brings you down to the other aspect of it, is that I can't experience someone else's consciousness. I can't be inside your mind. I can't read your thoughts. Some people can, but I can't be inside your mind, read your thoughts, feel your emotions, and feel all the biochemistry, biological impulses all happening all at the same time and be within that thought flow. But instead what happens is when we interact in the point of communication, there's an interaction that exchanges between the two of us. When that interaction exchanges, there's reflections that occur within me and within you that are dependent upon our own level of spiritual, mental, and physical development. And they reflect back and say, hey, I like this guy because it coincides with something, experiences that I've had in my life, or it correlates with the various experiences I've had, right? And so when we take that perspective that I cannot know you, I can only know you as well as I know myself, this also then relates directly to God. In the sense that I cannot have a relationship with God unless I truly know myself. I have to know myself, and the evolution and development of knowing myself allows me to be closer to God.
Exactly. And this book also teaches us how to resolve life challenges. Two ways. One is to meditate, and to really meditate in a way that you communicate with yourself, your higher self. That prayers are important and are useful and helpful. And if you really pray for certain things, if they're helpful, if the solutions are helpful for your spiritual growth, the solution will be provided to you. On the other hand, if you really want to win the lottery for your material wealth or personal gain, then you're not going to be provided with an answer. On the other hand, if you really want to help the humanity, then your higher self is going to provide you with an answer. The other way is to find a solution in life when you encounter challenges, is to have a good night of sleep. Because in dreams, our astral body really connects to our higher self through the cerebral canal, this portion of the brain. And so there's a French saying that night brings counsel. So if you have a good night of sleep, answers will appear if they're good for your spiritual growth.
I love that. I absolutely love that. Samuel, this was awesome. This was an absolutely fascinating conversation. I love talking to you. You're a wealth of information and knowledge. And this book, I put the link out there. So everybody who's looking for the link for the book, we got the Amazon link. Is that correct? Is that the good one to use?
Yes.
And so we got the Amazon link coming out there at you. I'm going to throw it on Pilled right there. In Rumble, here you go once again on Rumble. And I highly recommend people going out there and reading this book, because it seems like one of those books that is derived from a certain level of truth, and that people can maybe even have their own experiences to correlate with it. Because I know that right when you started talking about these beings, I was like, oh my goodness, like this reminds me of this experience that I had in my life. And there's multiple other experiences when you talked about it that correlate to this. in a summarization, can you kind of give us maybe your favorite parts of the book and one of the things that you kind of looked at in the book as being most influential to yourself?
It keeps changing. The first time I was more focused on the ET technologies. The second time, mostly the stories in the Bible. And right now, I'm mostly focused on the meaning of life, which is to respond to life challenges. Because of the information I know about China and also elsewhere, maybe there's going to be a financial crisis affecting every one of us. So when we have those kind of life challenges, the most important thing is how we respond to the challenges. And this is a very valuable spiritual lesson to learn because we are going to be reviewing our life, how we did in this life after we die. And there's also nothing to envy about the richest people in the world because they're having a more challenging lesson to learn than us because they're facing with a lot of temptations of using drugs, indulged in the material wealth or material life. So they have far more challenging lessons than us. So we should really focus on ourselves, how we take full advantage of what we experience and to learn as much spiritual lessons as possible. We also need to wake up and to look what's happening around the world, be realistic, and also to try to help others to the best ability we can. If we can bring the collective consciousness into place, if we can have a concerted action together, maybe a strike, maybe some other form of actions, then we can really make a difference in this world.
I 100% agree. Samuel Chong, you guys can, I created a short URL if you want to go to his website, redpills.tv/Chong. That's if you want to go to his website. The Amazon link is posted there. We'll also post it on the socialredpill.com and get that out to everybody. I just got the book in my cart. I'm going to order that here in a little bit because I'm just fascinated by this topic. And Samuel, we're going to have you come back on and talk more to us, especially about your other book that we were talking about pertaining to the Illuminati.
Yes, it doesn't really mention the word the Illuminati. When you really look at this, just briefly, that Ronald Bernard doesn't name names because for his safety reasons. If he names any organization, company, or person, he would have been dead. So this book also follows the same method. It doesn't really mention anything about the word Illuminati. This is something that I found out through my own personal research, and people can check it out. Remember, it's not for everyone. It contains very graphic descriptions. So warnings, I just have to warn you ahead of time. We can talk about that another time.
Absolutely. I can't wait to get rescheduled for that. Guys, that's all the time we have for tonight. We're going to be going to Fringe After Dark, a subscription show in about 40 minutes from now. If you're interested in getting on that, you only have to be a member of the socialredpill.com. We'll put it out tonight. All the links will be provided in the main chat for everybody to join. So please be a member of socialredpill.com and you can get into that where we're going to continue the conversation. And Samuel Chong, thank you so much for being with us tonight. Much appreciated for your vast amounts of knowledge on this topic. And this was just an amazing confirmation. So thank you so much, my friend.
Thank you for having me here.
All right. Take care. Good night, everybody. And we'll see you guys next time.